And I get a call from the Department of Harriman saying, hey, you have to turn yourself in. And I'm like, hold up, what? And they're like, yeah, we have criminal charges, or we filed criminal charges on you, and we need you to turn yourself in. I was facing a 15 to 20 year life in prison.
Welcome back to Success Unleashed, the show specifically for contractors, where we help you figure out how to live your best personal and professional life, ultimately to get the best and the most out of life itself. Today we have another special guest, Thomas, and I'm going to make sure I pronounce this right. Faaliliu.
Faaliliu, yeah.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. He owns All Pro Concrete Cutters, and you said there's only 20 of you in the state?
It's about 20 of us in the state.
20 in the state. Yeah. That is it. He's been at this thing for 4 years. He says, you can tell, just like me, he's not a spring chicken. So there's a story behind there, and that's really what I want to dive into today. So Thomas, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Now, we were talking a little bit beforehand about, where you grew up and how you grew up. And I don't think people spend enough time talking about that, like their roots, right? I grew up in a little border town. My dad was a school teacher. My mom was a homemaker. Back before WIC existed and it was cool, we would go and get powdered milk and the oats and make our own bread. So I had my own struggle, right? But tell me about you. Where did you grow up and what was growing up like for you?
I grew up in Compton, California. No, I didn't join any gangs or anything like that. I wasn't involved with that. My mom was very religious type person. And so she kind of kept us away from that type of life. It was there, we could have easily, tapped into that lifestyle. However, my mom was very look, if you follow these things, you're going to avoid all the other bad stuff that you see. And so we kind of stuck to that. So yeah, my life growing up in Compton was great. I mean, as a young kid, I'm always going to think it's great. You're a child, you only know what your environment is. And so, but looking back at that, I'm like, dude, we had a tough life. That environment was scary. However, I was grateful. I was grateful for the lessons growing up. Real quick, my grandfather was the first entrepreneur in our family. My grandfather was, he sold, first off, he collect boxes because he wasn't a citizen. And so he couldn't get a normal job in America. So he would go and collect boxes. And every morning we would go with him to drop those boxes off at a factory, and then he'd get a little small, cash check or whatever. And that whole time I thought that was that's his job. You know what I mean? And then, and we were also selling what's called luau, palusami. It was taro leaves wrapped in coconut oil and the foil. And so we sold that. He would make that every Saturday and sell it on, the Saturday night so that people can have it for Sunday dinners. And so he was the first entrepreneur, we didn't know that back at that time until we grew older and we realized he wasn't even a citizen. That was his thing. He was our first entrepreneur. And so I was grateful for that because I learned a big deal on sacrifice and waking up early in the mornings to, do the things that, to provide for his family. And so, yeah, that was my upbringing, man.
So I want to dive into that a little bit more. It's interesting that you say that. My grandparents, they were citizens, but my grandma, I remember every morning she'd grab a garbage bag and this long stick and we go collect cans, aluminum cans. Yeah. And she would go recycle the cans. Now my grandfather, he was a cowboy, legit cowboy. And then he worked in the mines, just hard labor, work, right? Yeah. Just salt of the earth people, but that's how they made their vacation money. It was, hey, go collect cans and recycle them. Yeah. But we would go with her, and I used to think it was so cool as a kid. Yeah. And now you look back and you're like, man, not just the hard work that was, but the lessons that it taught you. Yeah. Right? Talk about your family a little bit. Bro, Compton is not, it's not. Most people never been to Compton, and I don't recommend you go either. But everybody's got bars on the windows. You don't go outside past dark. There's all these unwritten rules and things that you don't do there. Yeah. But what was that like for you now looking back, as that was the environment you grew up in?
Yeah. I don't think my parents realized where they were getting themselves into because they're the first generation here. So when they moved to Compton, they thought it was the norm. You know what I mean? Like they thought this was it. We lived in a projects called Park Village, and in the projects, it's a one way in, one way out. It's if you go there now, you'd be like, yeah, I'm not going in there. But as a kid, that's, we'll go in, it would be the norm. And so I don't think my parents realized the environment at that time, because they were just thinking, I'm in America, this is great, I'm just going to go work and provide for my family. But what they didn't realize also was that there was a lot of crime going on at that time. There was a lot of in Park Village, we had a lot of Polynesians that all migrated into that community. So we all looked out for each other. Like our families looked out for each other. Like every house next to us was a Polynesian family. And so in that project, we felt peace because we knew there was another Polynesian family there. But those guys got involved into some bad stuff. You know what I mean? Like and growing up, I've always wanted to, test those things. But my parents were literally like, hey, so-and-so died. Do you want to end up like him? My cousin passed. And that was because he made bad choices. And it was an eye-opener for us, kids, growing up. I was the oldest in my dad's second marriage, because my dad's second marriage was to my mom. But we also had 4 older siblings from Carson. And they would come all the time, and they were like my big brothers and sisters. Like we never had a disconnect there. It was like a brother and sister relationship. But I saw the way they were living their life as well, and I can see, growing up that, oh man, that's not the life I want to get involved in. And not to say that they made bad choices. It was just more of like the guys that they were hanging around with was like guys that I knew, like, okay, my mom mentioned that, so I'm gonna stay away from those type of guys. I still have a lot of connection to, all my friends back home. But it's weird now because it's like there's no real, conversation. It's just, hey, what's up? How you doing? And that's it. There's no in-depth conversation. Yeah. But it's hard because majority of those guys that I still keep in contact with, man, they still live that life. So
what's that like? I think there's a lot of people that, it really doesn't matter where you grow up, right? Wrong side of the tracks, the hood,
sure.
the country, whatever you want to call it, but not in good circumstances, right? And there's always that pool to go back, right? Because I don't even know what it is, but like you said, those conversations are very surface level because it's like, this is not what your life has amounted to.
Sure.
Like you wake up, and you drink, or you wake up and you go, do this. You wake up and you go, and that's it. That's all they have to look forward to. What's that like for you kind of looking back? I know we haven't talked about your whole journey, but what's that like for you looking back and saying, man, I'm so happy that I didn't go down that path.
Yeah, man, I have family. Relatives, my closest people that I call my blood family, you know what I mean? Who were involved in that, they were always, respectful of my choices. They knew I was one way because that's the way I was, but they knew when we got down. But they knew that I wasn't the type of guy that was just going to, and I could have easily done that. I could have easily went down that route. A lot of church members, guys that I grew up with in the church, LDS, we're not perfect. A lot of people think we are, but we're not. But I grew up with a lot of good Polynesians that grew up in the church, and they made terrible choices. And so I could have easily fell the same way they did. It was just more of I knew I had a really good foundation, and that foundation was built off of my mom's teachings, because also my mom's hands. So it was my mom was like, hey, you come in this house, you're this way. If not, go live somewhere else. I don't want you back in this house. And so we always wanted a house to stay in. So we were okay, let's follow what mom says. And my mom always had good intentions. So it was always okay, all right, that was the path. But I could have easily went down that route. Because I have cousins and uncles that are locked up. They're still locked up. Some of them just got out, did a 20-something year bid. And I watched them, and I'm like, it's super hard for them to change. You know what I mean? Like, they're trying to, you know, like I've even offered, you know, hey, when you clean yourself and you get off parole, maybe move up to Utah and I'll help you. But I can see how hard it is for them to change because they've been in the system for so long and they've been a part of that lifestyle for so long. And to me, I just never saw any good in it, you know, like, and I look at where I am now and I still see my friends that are still involved in those things, and it's sad. Yeah. It's sad because they have full potential. I had a guy, man, that I played ball with, was top of the line linebacker. Was going to, like I even said, I was like, man, if this guy stuck to it, he would have been in the NFL. But he chose that life, and you know, like it's just sad to see, you know, like that where he is right now, like he's on drugs and stuff like that, and so, and he's in and out of jail, you know, and that's just the life that I knew that I wasn't going to be a part of, and even though I was close to it, yeah. My faith has really kept me going, you know, like I'm not perfect, but there's times where I felt like God was really like by my side during that hard time, you know, like, cause there were moments where when you know, one of my closest friends passed due to gang violence and stuff like that. There was moments where I could have easily got into the car and went with the boys and looked for whoever it was, you know what I mean? Like, but I knew, you know, like I'm better than that, you know what I mean? Like there's just a better way. Yeah. And so that's what it was.
Yeah, it's rough, and you're right. It's like every day you're still faced with that decision.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, they would welcome you back if you went back today.
Oh, yeah,
right? Like,
if I just said, yeah.
Without a doubt, right? And so it's really different. Like my uncle, so my mom is Puerto Rican, and my uncle got involved in the life, and he ended up getting shot and killed in a drive-by, right? Wow. And it was really hard for me because when it happened, I was younger, right? And like to understand, like, but I don't get it. Yeah. Like I know my tío, I know my uncle, like what happened, right? Yeah. It's so hard for me to comprehend. So I don't think that we're really critiquing that life. We're just critiquing what that life does to people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, I agree totally, 100%. From the outside looking perspective.
What about you then? You graduate, right? You're no longer with your mom, and there's something unique about you. You didn't go like right into, I'm going to be a business owner, right? Like there was a gap of time before that happened, right? Yeah. So like talk about that. What was that like? I mean, you mentioned that your grandfather was the first entrepreneur in the family. Yeah. What did you do when you graduated? Like what was that?
Dude, I worked security. I mean, like I worked security. I mean, every Polynesian, that was that was the freaking like end goal. We were going to go work at the casino. I actually worked at the casino, Commerce Casino in California. And my dad retired there. So like after his military, he went into security, been a lifer, you know, like, and just retired there. And to be honest with you, I didn't want that life because like growing up, I always felt like I wasn't a 9-to-5er. I always felt like, cause I joined a lot of like, multi-level marketing groups, like in California, man, there was so many, and I joined them, and I thought like, man, I'm going to get rich, you know, like I'm going to do this, and I was, and all of my friends knew, all of my friends that I grew up with, when I got involved into something, they knew they would follow me. Because they knew that that's where my mindset was. I was always going to be a business owner somehow and some way. No matter if I was working 9-to-5, I was going to find a way. And so doing that whole time, man, I'm working in security. I'm also trying to figure out life and join these like multi-level marketing, you know, quick money schemes, stuff like that, the pyramid stuff. And that was one of the things that draw me into, and this is at 19 years old. And so before I did go serve a mission, but right after high school, I didn't go right away. I wanted to find myself. I wanted to be the adult, you know what I mean? Like go into adulthood. I still stayed with my parents. But they were like, well, you should go on a mission. And I was like, it's not for me, you know, like not right now, maybe later. So, but I went to work, did some other things, met my wife at that time, you know what I mean? Like, and she just got back from her mission. And then, during that time, I was just trying to find myself. I was just trying to see. I always knew that entrepreneurship was probably going to be where my life heads. I just didn't know when.
Yeah.
The time, right? So, long story short, I just couldn't find it. Like I was hitting a roadblock, but then like the mission was calling me, and this was at the age of 20. And so the mission was calling me. I'm in this full-on relationship with my wife at that time, my girl at the time, who became my wife when I got back. But I'm in this relationship and I love her, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to get married, or do I go on a mission? Ugh. And, and then all these thoughts and weaknesses start to come in and creep in my mind. It was like, man, what if I go and she leaves me? And, like 2 years is a long time. But having that conversation with her and just saying, you know what? If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. You would wait. And then, if not, go on. So then I go serve a mission in Tonga. Yeah, so I speak Tongan. Yeah, so I went to go. I served my mission in the Tongan Islands, and I served there for 2 years, and I loved it. Man, I gained so much respect for the Tongan culture. Growing up Samoan, we always had this battle.
Yep.
Oh, man, there was this battle. But what's funny about it is my closest friend I grew up with, he was Tongan, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know he was like full-blown Tongan. And I did know he was Tongan, but I was like, yeah, but I always call him Oos. Like Oos is like Uso, like I always call him Oos, and he'd be like, hey, what's up, Oos? So I always looked at him as like my Samoan brother, but he's Tongan. You know what I mean? Like, so, and his name is Afu Whakato, and he lives in Tonga. Yeah, so shout out to him, man. That's one of my best friends I grew up in middle school with. And so when I go on my mission, I built this love for the people there. You know what I mean? Like, and what you see in America is like this divide, right? You see the Samoans here and the Tongans here, and there is some collaboration there. However, there's some tension. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to, like gangs and stuff like that, there's a lot of tension there. Everybody wants to pump their chest and who's the baddest guy, and that's really what it is. But when you go to the islands, especially American Samoa, or you go to Tonga, there's no divide. They treated me like I was one of them. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why I felt this like unbelievable love that they have for me. And so I was like, wow. I was scared to go out there because I'm Samoan. I don't know how they're going to take me. And then when I get there, man, it was all love, man. Those people treated me with the utmost respect. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time there. I learned a lot about the culture, learned how to speak it. So then I came back, and what was great about me getting into this field was that guess who's all in concrete? The Tongan community.
Yeah.
And so when I tapped into this realm, I was their go-to because I could speak Tongan and I could connect with them. And they look at me as a Tongan guy anyway. So they're like, oh, that's my Tongan brother. And I'm like, yeah, so, me, and maybe there was a purpose for that. Cause now that I look at it, and I'm like, man, like how great was the setup? Mm-hmm. I'm 40 now. You know what I mean? How great is this setup? I've been in business for, almost 4 years. And all of my walkouts, all of my projects were, I would say 70% were all my people. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm like, wow, how grateful. Like if I didn't serve in Tonga and I wasn't able to communicate and speak Tongan and have that relationship with all my contractors, especially the Tongan community, man, I would have never been that guy for them, and so that was a true blessing. So
that's huge. You bring up a couple of points that I kind of want to follow up on. The first one is, it's really interesting, like men especially, right?
Oh.
And men have this weird thing in life. It's like, even if they grow up, in a God-centered household, it's like, it's not cool to necessarily believe in God other than, you do your little cross or whatever. And, but then everything else has nothing to do with God. But I think at some point in life, you're almost forced to acknowledge God one way or another.
Yeah.
Right. Either you acknowledge you ignored him, you acknowledge that he had a hand in your life, you acknowledge something with God. Right.
Yeah.
So like for you, and I've shared my story, on here, but for you, where was that point where you started to see that God was actually guiding you in your life?
I think it was when we left Compton. We left Compton, I was 12, and we moved to Long Beach, another ghetto. We thought we were upgrading, right? So we as kids, we were so oblivious and naive to, our environment. So leaving Compton, we were like, yes, we're going to a peaceful place. Then we get to Long Beach, and I'm like, there's gang violence here, But I think that was the moment where I felt like when I was making choices there, when I felt like God's hand in a lot of things, like in my choices. Because when I was going into high school, I noticed that a lot of my friends were making those decisions to, join and do those things. And that was the moment, the pivotal moment of my life where if I could, there was two choices for me. And at that moment was either join that or just stay here in the path that no one wants to take. And it was just like the hardest one too. You know what I mean? Because then you're the outcast. You're the guy that, all the boys are like, we don't want to talk to that guy because he's too perfect. You know what I mean? Like, and stuff like that. And I was far from it. It was just more of like, but I felt like God's hand in a lot of things of my choices. I became an Eagle Scout. I got it, my parents got us involved in the Boy Scouts and stuff like that. And so I was more involved in that. And then football was also taking my time. And so I put all my time. And I felt like God's hand was like, hey, don't do that. There's going to be some things that I want you here. And you just do that. So that's why I felt.
You get back from your mission, right? Did you get married right away? Like jump into the workforce? Like what happened?
So I got back home. I thought I was going to get right into construction because, back in Tonga, there was always service there. Mm-hmm. So we did a lot of concrete and a lot of service work. And so my mindset coming home was I didn't want to be in security. I didn't want to go back to that. So I was like, man, I want to get back into construction. That's what I was doing service with in the islands. So I get home and that didn't pan out. It didn't pan out because you have to know somebody, right? In California, especially in California, because it's a huge market and you got to know somebody in it to be able to get a name in. And so I just didn't find the person. And so I was like, I'm going back to Commerce Casino. And shout out to Commerce Casino, man. I love that place. I go, when I'm home, I play some poker there. But Commerce Casino, I was like, my dad was like, just go back to, stable job, your armed security. My dad always says that, your armed security, so you feel like you're somebody, I was like, all right, man, let me go back to that. So I did that for a year and a half. I didn't like it. You know what I mean? So me and my wife were talking about doing something else and probably getting into real estate game. And so I took some classes, went into the real estate, and it just didn't. My mind was just like, like when you have high hopes for something and then you get involved in it and it just didn't interest me after that. Because there was something in real estate that just turned me off. And that's how it was. It was just like, nah, maybe this is not for you. And so that's when I felt like, okay, maybe I should work with kids, get into coaching. So, and I love football. I love the game of football and what it's done for me, in my life. And so I was like, you know what, maybe I can give back to the kids. So I became a freshman coach for Cypress High School while I was still working at Commerce Casino because I wanted to do something else too. But I got involved in that and I was like, dude, this is my calling as a football coach. This is my calling. And so I did that for a year for that season. And then we moved to Utah. That's when we decided, okay, let's hop up and move up here. And then I got involved with group homes, where troubled teens and stuff like that. And so I felt I'm going to take some of what I've learned in coaching with young kids to that. And I was sadly mistaken because there's two different, type of mentorship there, two different ways of doing it. And I brought the football mentality of I'm going to get these kids and make sure that they follow the rules and do this. But man, it's different. These group homes were kids that were told they weren't going to amount to anything. Were told, some of these kids did some really terrible things. And so having that football coach mentality and try to bring it into their lives was just not connecting well. And so that career ended, real quick. And so I was trying to figure my life out after that. And then a big event happened, which I thought was like one of the worst things ever could happen to my life. So my son asphyxiated at 3 months, and this is back in 2019. He asphyxiated, vomit, like on his bottom. And then, I'm performing CPR. We rushed him to this time I'm living in Harriman. We rushed him to Riverton Hospital to revive him, and they revive him. They ship him, they helicopter him up to Primary Children's Hospital, and that whole dramatic event changed my life. And that's when I was like, okay, there's some things I need to change in my life that's going to either break me or, put me in a place to, get my family where it needs to be. So that happens. We're there. And then family comes. We give my son a blessing. Everyone's like, everything's going to be okay. Then they all leave. It's just me, my wife, my daughter's with my in-laws, and we're just there. And then the army of neuro doctors come in around 1 o'clock, and they come in and they remove me from the room, and they wanted to just be glued onto my wife. And I'm like asking questions like, hey, what's going on? What's happening? And they were saying, well, let's talk to your wife first. And then I could see my wife just dramatically go crazy. And I'm like, well, what's going on, dude? My wife's crying profusely. Like, well, what's going on? Like, you guys got to tell me. Well, wait, then I see law enforcement. Then I see a family doctor. Then I see all these people from DCFS, CPS, just start coming down the hallway. And I'm like, what's going on here? You know what I mean? Like, what is happening? And my wife quickly looks at me and she's like, what did you do? And I was like, what do you mean, what did I do? Like, I don't know what you're talking about. And she was like, well, they're saying this and they're saying that. And so the main neuro doctor comes and pulled me to the side and says, well, from the CT scans and the MRIs to the brain, we think you shook your child. We think, and we're calling it shaking baby syndrome. I've never heard of the term ever in my life. And I'm shocked, and I'm confused because I don't know what they're talking, because they're speaking a whole different language. And so I'm like, what is that? Well, we assume you were frustrated at your child and you shook him so bad to where he lost oxygen to the brain. And this is why we're here. And I'm like, you kidding me? You're kidding me, right? Like, this is really happening. And then that's when law enforcement was like, hey, you have to leave the hospital. We're going to take you to your home, and we're going to remove you from your home. I didn't know where to go at that time. Like, I was like, I was stuck. I'm trying to talk to my wife. They're removing me from that. And so, like, I felt like I was in a dark place. Like, I was literally in a dark place. I didn't know what to do at that moment. Like, how do I navigate life after this? Like, what I was told and what's going to happen. Like, I didn't know what's to happen. And so I get removed from the house. I go out, and then I don't know what. During this time, like, it's such a blur, but during this time, we were also looking to move during this time to Mapleton. And that's where we ended up. But we actually had fundings in the house in Mapleton. So when this all happened, I was forced, literally, it's just like, now I got to go and move into that house. So now we have 2 mortgages. How am I going to pay 2 mortgages? like I'm screwed. So, but my wife was like, just move to the house because you don't have a place. So just move there and then we'll settle things down. And then I get a call from Harriman. And mind you, I was a coach at Harriman High School. So I built through a lot of relationships with the coaching staff, and then also the sergeant was also on the coaching staff. So I've, had a really good relationship with him. And I get a call from the department of Harriman saying, hey, you have to turn yourself in. And I'm like, hold up, what? And they're like, yeah, we have criminal charges, or we filed criminal charges on you, and we need you to turn yourself in. And I called my wife and like, what do I do? And she was like, well, let me call my dad. Her dad was a doctor. So he was like, well, you have to call an attorney to see, how to maneuver from there, how to go from there, whether you turn yourself in or not. So I called my mission president, who was an attorney of the church at the time. And I'm breaking down. I'm telling him I need help. Like I'm stuck. Like I don't know what to do. I don't know how to handle this. And my mission president was like, okay, I'm going to get you involved with the guy there, because he was in New Zealand at the time. So I'm going to get you involved with this guy. He's a good friend of mine. He's out of Salt Lake. Let me call him, ask him for a favor. So he calls me right away. So after I get off the phone with my mission president, I think it was like 20 minutes after that, that gentleman called me. He was an attorney. He was like, hey, don't turn yourself in. Just stay in Mapleton. Come Monday, meet me at the courthouse in Salt Lake. So I get to the courthouse in Salt Lake, and he talks to the judges, and he's like, hey, we're just going to, I don't know what it's called, where you just like go fingerprinting and just bail out right at that process. Yeah. So it's just getting processed. So I went home that day. But I was freaking out. I have never been through this process before. So it was scary, to go through that. And I didn't know what's to come and all that stuff. So I get home and I'm crying. You know what I mean? I'm lost. I'm talking to my wife. My wife's thinking about divorce at that time, because she was like, my son, and she has every right to feel that way. I'm still confused. I don't even know what's happening. And so we fast forward year after that, because we were separated. We couldn't get too close to each other because DCFS and CPS got involved, and so we had to go through all these courses and classes, and but we still couldn't. I couldn't be with my child. I had to be with my child with another adult and all that stuff. And so, mind you, man, those years were like the toughest years for me, because I was like, I want to be by my kids, but I wasn't allowed to because of the state. And plus criminal charges were filed. So DCFS family court and all that stuff ended. And then we go into the criminal case, to where I was facing a 15 to 20 year life in prison. That was that was what they wanted to give me. And they said if I took a plea deal, they would give me 10 years. And I was like, no way, no freaking way I'm doing that. I'm not doing that. There's no way. I didn't do anything wrong here. So my mission president calls me and he's like, hey, you got to lawyer up. You have to find the best attorney in the state that would fight against this. And I don't know if I should mention his name. He's retired, but he was one of the badass attorneys in the state. I think everyone knows who he is. Well, he's expensive. And so I got involved with him and I got connected to him to where I started to see God's hand in a lot of things, where he was like, my other attorney was kind of like all over the place. With him, it was like, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and I want you to do this. I want you to fly here. I want you to do this, connect with these doctors here. And I felt like during that time, I was like, okay, I think we got the right attorney. You know what I mean? Like, so, but it was expensive, man. So fortunate for me, man, I had a lot of good people around that was donating some funds. especially my mission president, being, the guy he is, he's like a second father to me. Like, these guys came in and was the saviors, you know what I mean? Like, and really put the time and the effort to give me the financials that I need to get a really good attorney. And so fast forward to that, everything was closed, you know what I mean? Like, but I think that was the pivotal moment of my life, because I was working in construction at that time. I think that was the moment in my life where it was like, okay, I need to do my own thing, because not only is my child disabled and nobody cared about it during that whole time, like, I have to take care of this child now. I have to make sure that this child gets the funding that he needs, especially being cerebral palsy. Like, it's expensive. His wheelchair is $15,000. You know what I mean? Like, I have to do everything in my power to set up a business that will give me the financial means to take care of him, and not just him, my family. And that was the motivation. Like, after that whole freaking case, it was the motivation. Like, I know that it doesn't solve the problems that I had with my wife, because my wife still felt like there wasn't trust there. You know what I mean? Like, I'm still dealing with that. You know what I mean? Like, because there, I broke that trust with her, and I'm trying to work that out with her. But my motivation of starting this business was to be the financial provider, the full financial provider, not just for my son, but give my wife that security of trust. Like, hey, man, I'm doing the best I can. I know you hate my guts right now, and I understand that, but I'm going to do everything in my power to get financially set to where you're okay. You know what I mean? Like, even if you hate me to the day you die, I understand that. But we made a commitment, and that's where it's at. And so every day, that's my mindset, is go out, work, and provide, go catch the buffalo, bring home the buffalo, and provide for my family. Even if my wife is like, that doesn't do anything for me. You know what I mean? Like, my son's still disabled. You know what I mean? Like, and I know you didn't do this on purpose, but this is what happens when we neglect things like that. And my whole life, I felt like that was to come, because I've neglected a lot of things in my life. And that was a pivotal moment where I felt like that neglect caught up with me, and my son became handicapped because of it. So that's why I do what I do.
That's a very powerful story. And my kind of follow-up question to that is, I mean, you kind of mentioned it, like why you finally decided to go all in on you and the business, right? It's your family. And we were talking beforehand a little bit about, the growth of the business. And, you mentioned that you're not necessarily looking to build a, $10 million a year business.
Yeah.
Because it's not about that for you. And I think this is sometimes where a lot of contractors get stuck.
Yeah.
Right. And I focus on helping contractors systemize and ultimately scale. Like, that's what I focus on. But I also am well aware of, like, hey, like, there's such a thing as a lifestyle business.
Yeah.
A business that provides for you and your family and your means, and you're well taken care of.
Yeah.
And that's what you want. Like, that's what makes you happy. And there's nothing wrong with that. So, like, at what point did you decide, like, that's as far as I want to go? Because you're pretty successful as a one-man band.
Yeah.
Right? And there is opportunity for growth, but you're not taking that. So, like, why? What is the motivation behind it?
Because I want to, for me, I still, hey, this is my baby. You know what I mean? Like, it's my baby, is what I created. I'm comfortable where I'm at. I stay within my lane. I've always lived by that code, like, stay in your lane, like, know your purpose. Like, my purpose is not to be this rich guy or this wealthy guy. However, I do want money, and I love money, and I think money does provide a lot. And so for me, it was, if I'm my own band, I will make a lot of it. You know what I mean? Like, now if I bring in a lot of people and try to scale, I'm making a lot of sacrifices there, and it might not quite go the way I wanted to go. You know what I mean? Like, financially, right? Because you have to be able to scale, and you have to make some sacrifices there to move money around. I'm not in a position to do that right now. And that doesn't entertain me. Like, it doesn't move me in any way. Like, I'm motivated off of my real purpose is when I see that door cut, like, what brings me joy is when somebody's like, oh my gosh, now I have a walkout. You know what I mean? Like, I now can rent this space out. You know what I mean? Like, now I have an egress window that's up to code. No, I have plumb lines now to put in my new. That's really what I got in this business for. It wasn't about the money aspect. I knew there was a lot of money involved in it, but at the same time, it was like seeing the joy of you walking away from a project and you had your hand in that. That brings me more. And then the blade cutting. Like I tell people all the time, when that blade is on my saw and I touch concrete, that's music to my ears. Like that just brings me, it brings me back to the first time I started cutting. Like I felt like a little kid, right? Like, and so really, I mean, I would love to scale one day. I'm just not there yet.
Yeah.
You know, like, and people, to which his own, right? Everybody has their own ideas of what they want. People have reached out to me, asking me, hey, let's partner up, let's scale. And I'm like, I'm not there. And I don't know when I will be. You know what I mean? Like at the same time, I stay in my lane, and I love what I'm doing, and I love being a one man band, and I enjoy it. And my safe space is on the road. You know, I cover Wyoming, I cover Idaho, I cover Colorado, I cover Nevada. So when I'm out there doing work, that's my time to like really be in the zone. Like and I love that. You know what I mean? I love that about what I do. And I get it. Acor is a massive company. Saw Jockey is a massive company, and they're doing really, really well. However, it's like that doesn't excite me, as a business owner. Like for me, I love being the business owner operator.
Well, what would you say to the contractor that's, kind of at that point where they have to make that decision, hey, am I going to scale or am I going to stay where I'm at? What would you say to somebody who's not really feeling that pull to, dump it all back in and go all in for that next level?
Yeah. Take your time, pray about it. You know what I mean? Like, I've prayed about it because there were moments where I could scale, and it was last year. Last year around October time, I had an opportunity to partner up with a big company, and I prayed about it, and I was ready for it, but someone was telling me you're not. You know what I mean? Like, so I would say take your time, be patient, learn it, understand that part of scaling before you get involved into it, because a lot of people like to jump and they didn't learn that part of it yet. And so for me, I'm always asking questions. I'm always saying, okay, so if this happens, what about this? What about that? Like, hey, teach me this. And so like, help me understand this part of it. Like, because if I jump in this with you, I need to know, like I have all my buttons, buttoned up and everything's ready to go. I don't want to be lost in that process. And so I tell people all the time, if you are going to scale, learn it. Learn how to scale. Go reach out to people that have done it. Like me, I'm constantly reaching out to Acor. Like people don't understand this, but like how I built my business, I made calls to Saw Jockey. I made calls to, Greens, all these companies, big companies that have been out for years, and I've got their numbers. You know what I mean? Like, and then when I connected my numbers to them, it just made my business even flow. So I'm always asking questions. You know what I mean? I'm always asking, how to get better. How do you do things better? How to do this? Watch their mistakes. And then I'd be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? Like, so, but that's, be patient, ask questions, learn the game, learn how to scale, learn from guys like yourself. Like if you are that coach that helped them scale, learn from guys like yourself that knows how to do that and reach out. And so that's my advice to those guys.
That's great advice. As we kind of start to wrap this up, I always like to ask a question, and just whatever comes to your mind, right away. And it's a very simple question, right? If you had to start all over, right? You're starting at zero. You still have your mindset, you still have your skill set, but you're starting over at zero.
No.
You got $1,000 to your name. What are you doing with that $1,000?
I'm killing the game. I'm still doing it. I'm still cutting concrete.
But what are you doing with that $1,000? So
that's going into investment, into the business. But like, you don't have to fully, like my mistake was to take all of my equity from the home and dump it into the business. Now looking back, there's different ways to do that. And so with that $1,000, I mean, that would just be pocket money. I wouldn't know how to get a loan. I wouldn't know how to do this. But I thought getting money out of my HELOC was the best way to do it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, but it's not. There's so many SBSs out there, especially in the game of concrete cutting. If you know the game and vendors like Hilti, vendors like Husqvarna, they know you cut in the game. They will give you what you want and then have you start for free. And so that's like it. Like when you said if I went back with the same knowledge, I'd kill this game without having to like spin a dime.
Yeah. So what you're saying then is you would leverage the knowledge and experience that you've gained.
Yeah.
It's not about the money.
It's not about the money. It's all mental. It's all knowledge of the game and how you do it. I would change things up there, and we'll be successful a lot faster than where we are right now. But that doesn't mean that, like I learned. And so where I'm at right now, if I didn't have those, opportunities of learning throughout those years, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for that time that I spent learning the game. So
brought you where you are today.
Yeah.
Love it, man. Well, Thomas, appreciate you making time to share your story with us. And what I love about it is, like, it had a little bit to do with construction, a little bit to do with being an owner, but really more to do about you, right, and your journey. Yeah. So if you're a contractor and you're at any point in this journey, right, you're just starting off, you're working for somebody else still, you're at that point where you're thinking about making that jump and looking at scaling, just understand, like, there's a North Star, there's a guide, there's a whatever you want to call it in life, there's somebody watching out for you, right? And if you take some time to pay attention, to have that conversation with that person, that they're going to help you make that right decision, the decision that's best for you. So as always, again, take something from this conversation with Thomas, take something from his experience, from his story, apply it to yours, and push forward. All right. You know what time it is. It's time to get after it. 3, 2, 1. Off you go. Thanks for listening to the Success Unleashed podcast. Before we go, show some love for your favorite podcast by liking, subscribing, and leaving us a review. Until we see you again, it's time to get after it. 3, 2, 1, off you go.